Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. And I'm just going to say what time it is out here so you guys know how early we're doing this interview. 8 a.m. It's 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. But I have a fabulous guest with me, Licia. And Licia wrote I am healing a mother's wounds. And I'm sorry, Licia, if I screwed that up completely, but we're going to talk about her book. And Licia has been on my podcast once before, so we're going to dive more into detail about her book and why she wrote the book. Before I screw up any further, I'm going to let Licia take it away.
Well, thank you so much. Well, my name's Licia Berry, and I'm the author of the best-selling book, I Am Her Daughter, The Healing Path to a Woman's Power, which examines the mother wound individually, culturally, and globally, and looks at that wound through a couple of different lenses, certainly spiritually and, psychologically, but also through brain science, through my experience as an educator and working with people with various brain issues and helping them recover and use more of their brain. So it's kind of an interesting, spirit plus science examination of what I consider to be one of the gravest issues in our culture today. So it's written for women as well as men, although the title is I Am Her Daughter, so clearly, it's a call out to the women.
Yeah.
But it's intended to be a roadmap for women who have difficulty with their mothers, issues with their mothers, for women who have difficulty trusting themselves, who have low self-esteem or don't have a real deep belief in their value and worthiness, and also for women who feel a call to be part of changing the culture to be more inclusive of women and of feminine energy in general. So it's it's a big one.
That plan. I like that plan, changing cultures here. Okay, I heard from a little birdie that you are a retired preschool teacher. I am soon to be a recovering preschool teacher. What made you get out of the educational field?
Well, actually, I didn't teach preschool. I taught K through 12, and I did that for several years in the Atlanta public schools. And at first, I was very excited. Thrilled to be an educator, in that venue at first because I was young and stupid. No, sorry. No. Because I had no, I'm kidding. I had an earnest desire, to help, to change the world through education. And after a few short years of doing that, I quickly learned that there was an institutional problem, that kids were not being encouraged. That children were not being encouraged to use all of their brain. That it was very left brain dominant, and things that we really need in our lives, like empathy and emotional intelligence and imagination and intuition, were undervalued and even dismissed. And so I didn't want to be part of that system anymore because it just felt like it was adding to the imbalance that I see in the greater culture. So I started my own private practice, consulting and doing contract work and working with young adults and children with various brain issues. And because of my education background, I guess it was a natural leap, and learned so much about how many things we can overcome when we use more of our brain. And then later began applying that knowledge about the brain to a private kind of a healing practice, a teaching practice, because I seem to attract women who have been through trauma of some kind, in addition to sort of a general, working with the population about how to use more of their brain. And I lecture and speak about this all over the place. But women were coming to me asking how to overcome, their fear of public speaking, their fear of stepping out with their book that they were burning to write but were scared to write, how to claim their creative voice. And I found it all came back to using more of our brain, which I then, found out, spiritually that, related back to a lack of feminine awareness in the culture and, issues with mother. So it kind of all came full circle for me. So that's the long answer to why I love the education system.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on the education system. I've been in it since 2006 and finally making a job transition as a medical student. I'm so happy about it because these kids and the culture is not making changes for themselves. We tell these kids and we tell the culture that you can't dream. You can't dream to be anything. You must sit down and do your homework and do all that stuff. And then no wonder why we have kids with ADD and ADHD and getting diagnosed 1,000 miles a minute because we're not experiencing what it's truly like to heal ourselves with all brain power.
Absolutely correct. I couldn't agree with you more. There are so many kinds of intelligence, that we miss in a typical U.S. educational institution. We really drive a certain kind of intelligence, intellectual, intelligence. We don't value emotional intelligence, musical intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, which requires, a body to move in order to really embody and understand things. So there are many different styles of learning, many different ways of being intelligent that are not only, diminished because we don't pay attention to them, but even suppressed because it's so often that those kinds of intelligence are actually made fun of in the school system by other kids who are also products of the culture, of course. But because they're diminished and devalued by the system itself, it just makes those special kinds of intelligence crawl away into the corner, and the person who has those kinds of intelligence often feels like there's something wrong with them. And that is the beginning of disorder, in the brain and in the psyche and in the heart and the soul of the person. When you start believing there's something wrong with you, you start getting ill in some capacity, and that's not a good thing. Yeah. We don't need more of it in our culture.
No.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, you left the education system. You decided to put pen to paper. And how did that make you feel?
Well, I have to confess that writing is a healing tool for me. I've had to overcome quite a few challenges in my own life, including early trauma, different abuses, and even attempted murder and sexual assault. And so for me, this journey to understand the brain, to understand trauma, to understand healing was very much my own journey. And it wasn't until, recently, I'm 51 now, so I've had, 3 decades of doing this work. It wasn't until in the last, 5 to 10 years that I really felt that I had enough information and had healed my own self enough that I could actually offer what I had learned to other people. So to be able to write about it and to be out there talking about it and kind of sparking ideas in people's minds and challenging some assumptions that people have is just a huge joy to me. And, very thankful for the opportunity to talk about it, of course. So grateful to have this time with you, the second interview with you, on the show. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. Now, I know I'm going to ask you the favorite child question, but what is your favorite chapter in the book?
Oh gosh. Well, there are, I have to say that every chapter builds on other chapters, but one of my most beloved chapters is the chapter about ancestral memory. And ancestral memory is in essence the theory that we carry the memory of our ancestors in our DNA, and that we are actually often driven to make decisions unconsciously by the memory that we have in our DNA that was lived by our ancestors. And in that chapter, I examined that, in ancient cultures, indigenous cultures, it's understood that we have our ancestors with us all the time, and that it's not any kind of a weird thing to think about your ancestors being next to you or inside of you or guiding you. It's understood. But in modern neuroscience, there's actually now evidence that trauma can be passed down on the DNA generations and generations later, and that someone, say, alive today can be carrying internal memory, ancestral memory, for example, from an ancestor that went through the Holocaust, or as in the case of my ancestors who went through the Native American genocide, 500 years ago when the first European, washed ashore on the coast of North Carolina, where my family is from. So that these memories live inside of us and are often kind of in the background operating within us, and we don't even realize it. So it's a very intriguing area of brain study as well as genetic study, in addition to that whole sort of spiritual, holistic, viewpoint of being connected to something greater than ourselves and being part of a long line of love that brought us to this moment. So that's probably my most beloved chapter at this point.
Oh my God. So, okay, you're saying that people who had ancestors go through the Holocaust horrors could still be carrying that trauma.
Absolutely, no question about it. Absolutely.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you Google,
science
you can.
Fascinates me.
It is fascinating, especially, if you have interest in the brain and in human behavior, to be able to look at, other causes besides, the nature versus nurture, whole conversation about human behavior and psychology, to look at underlying, things that we frequently dismiss as woo-woo or, not provable, wishful thinking. To find that there's actually evidence that these things exist is just a remarkable leap in science. It's wonderful. And of course, this happens more often than not, that the ancient, indigenous knowledge proves out once again, and science is the last to catch up. But thank goodness, because then we do have a language to describe these things. So, yeah.
Well, Licia, as most people know by now, I have cerebral palsy, and I am very lucky that when I was young, I got my brain with therapies and all this good stuff to rework itself, and that's why I'm sitting there doing this podcast today. So when you say the ancestors have, if we have cultural traumas because they went through the Holocaust or Hiroshima, I can believe that because I have seen with my own cerebral palsy that the brain and body can rework itself to the vehicles that we call the human body.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's a very interesting correlation between, between trauma and the brain. whether it's, accidental trauma like a fall. My son, for example, recovered from a very serious traumatic brain injury that almost killed him through the whole brain work that I do, plus his determination to recover. But trauma due to, to birth issues, that there's a correlation between trauma and the brain's desire to work. So it will try very hard, the brain will try very hard to utilize other parts of the brain to pick up the function of the part of the brain that is damaged or that needs to rest or needs to heal. And so this is the bottom line, this is the premise of the work, that I have done with people's brains is, if there's an issue somewhere in the brain where it's not 100%, at 100% function, that you can actually, through different, practices and techniques and therapies, utilize other parts of the brain to pick up those functions. And this was something that was, highly controversial when I first started working with people with the various brain issues. And, it was just totally a thought, a theory at that point. But what we're now seeing, in brain science is that it's true that the brain is plastic. It really wants to change and grow and make the best of, itself. And so it's very willing with a little encouragement, to pick up different parts of the brain to accomplish, greater brain function. So you were very fortunate to be in the care of people who understood to get you into therapies right away so that you were able to utilize more of your brain and to increase your capacity. That's just fantastic. And what you're doing is fantastic. So, again, just grateful to talk with you and have the opportunity to connect. It's really important work.
Well, it is. It is. And for those of you that don't know, I have a New York Times bestselling author coming on my podcast next Friday, and she's going to talk about mindset and the mental mindset, her book, and she's going to talk about the power of the brain, and she's going to talk about mind over matter stuff too. And so the power of the brain is really powerful when you guys think about it. And brain science fascinates me to no end because of the traumatic brain injury that I had when I was young, encompassing CT, aka CT. And so brain science fascinates me to no end. And so do you think you're going to write another book, Licia, or no?
Oh, yeah, this is my fifth. So I'm a prolific writer, and I'll just keep on writing. The next book at this point looks to be a connection between neuroscience and ancestral memory, very specifically the way that we can tap into collective memory and genetic memory, ancestral memory. And, again, it has to be from an indigenous perspective as well as a neuroscience perspective, because you can't talk about it purely from a neuroscience perspective without some kind of reference to people's experience, which of course doesn't count in science. So you have to include both. It has to be a transpersonal approach. But it's very interesting to me, and this may be of interest to you and some of your listeners, that in the old days, a long time ago when we were all indigenous people, our ancestors knew that when someone lived a life and had all of life's experiences, and when they died, that the medicine person of the village or the tribe needed to do special work to clean up, in essence, clean up that person's life so that that person could move on, in their, whatever the journey is after our body dies, but also so their descendants did not have to carry the unresolved issues from that person's life. And that cleaned up the path for their descendants to live their own life and have their own experiences and their own mistakes and their own triumphs. However, since the rise of industrial culture and the increased capacity of the left brain dominance and the diminishment of the input of our right brain, we have forgotten how to take care of our descendants, and we have forgotten about that, that whole seventh generation quote. We have forgotten that we need to clean up our stuff, because what we're now understanding is that the memory and the trauma and the unresolved issues are indeed passed on in the DNA, and that these children are being born today with greater and greater load on their central nervous system structure, on their energetic structure, and they're being born more and more with a proclivity to being overwhelmed in their central nervous system, and coming out with brain issues. So I see this as connected absolutely to the material in my book, the ancestral memory, to the problem of the culture, being left brain dominant, and the rise in various brain disorders that we're seeing, in the world. So I hope that people, when they hear this podcast, if nothing else, that it kind of makes them think for a minute. And, of course, they can pick up my book on my website at LiciaBerry.com. And I'm on Facebook, so I've got live feeds I do every morning to talk about this material on the I Am Her Daughter page on Facebook. And I welcome people's questions and emails and comments. Love interacting with my readers.
Well, that's fascinating, and I believe you when you say more and more of these kids are coming out with a load on the nervous system, and technology doesn't help. Technology doesn't help. And so thank you so much for doing all this work. And people can find you at your website, which is, what is it?
It's LiciaBerry.com, so that's spelled Licia Berry, Berry.com, LiciaBerry.com. And again, I'm on all the social media. They can look me up on any of those and connect there as well.
Well, thank you. And I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode with Licia. And I just hope you take this with a grain of salt when you hear it today being Thursday, and this episode will go live. I just hope you sit and stop and think how powerful the brain is, and if you speak negatively to it, it will not like you. And then let's make the changes we need to make in the universe to make it better.
Absolutely.
And this podcast has been sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a clothing line out of California. Grace by Grit is giving you guys 20% off any of their athletic line. And this podcast is also sponsored by Kitter, Kitter. Kitter is a desktop Twitter app that composes tweets for you and puts the trending hashtags with the tweets so you can get seen. And I want to thank my Twitter audience for helping me out with this podcast over the weekend. And so I really appreciate Licia's time, and I really appreciate the knowledge. Thanks, you guys.